All right, let's dive in. This time we're taking on Intergalactic by the Beastie Boys. When you sent this one in, I gotta say, my curiosity was piqued. I mean, what is it about these lyrics that still feels so fresh, even after all these years?
Well, you hit on something interesting there. With lyrics, we're not just dealing with words on paper. We're actually getting a glimpse into the mind of the artist, their influences, their whole world, really.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And with this one, there are layers for sure. We've got that, intergalactic, planetary, intergalactic thing happening right off the bat. Super catchy, no doubt. But I feel like it's doing something more than just getting stuck in our heads.
Definitely. It's playful, yeah, but the
Yeah.
Beastie Boys, they were always about pushing the boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So it's like they're taking that playfulness and just launching it into outer space. Like, hey, nothing can hold us back, not even planet Earth.
I love that. And they're definitely not holding back. I mean, how many times do they drop in another dimension, another dimension? It's like they're warping us right into their world. And their world is, well, intergalactic.
That repetition, it's key. Almost hypnotic, right? It pulls you right into their sonic world. But it also says a lot about their ambition. They weren't content to just stay in one lane. They were constantly pushing the envelope, exploring new sounds, and claiming their space in the musical cosmos.
It makes me wonder if that another dimension thing is more than just a cool phrase. It seems to pop up a lot in their work, this idea of always pushing beyond expectations.
You're picking up on something important there. The Beastie Boys were constantly pushing boundaries, not just with their music, but with their visuals, their humor, their whole approach to being artists.
I love that. So we've got this sense of boundless energy, this drive to push into uncharted territory. But then they also throw in these shout outs like, thank Modi for sticking to themes and from the family tree of old school hip hop. It's like they're grounding themselves in hip hop history even while they're blasting off into space.
Those shout-outs are crucial. They're placing themselves within a lineage, a history of hip-hop artistry. They're acknowledging the giants who came before them. Mo D, Grandmaster Flash, Run DMC, recognizing that they're part of a larger tradition,
Yeah.
even as they're carving out their own unique path.
It's that mix of respect and innovation, you know what I mean? It's like, we see you old school, but we're taking this spaceship in a whole new direction.
Exactly. Paying homage to the past while simultaneously pushing the music forward. Brilliant balance, really.
And here's where I think the Beastie Boys are just so much fun. They can be total goofballs one minute, then drop these lines that are pure swagger, like, super educated, I'm smarter than Spock, and ain't no brother like the KRD.
You can't help but smile when you hear those rhymes. They're so over the top, but it's infectious. And it's a part of hip-hop culture, right? Not meant to be taken literally. It's playful exaggeration, a way of claiming their space.
It's like a verbal dance, full of energy, full of wit. They're not just rapping, they're entertaining, they're provoking, they're making us smile and nod our heads
They
along.
pull you in,
Yeah.
make you want to listen closer, and maybe even match their energy. It's about that connection with the audience, on a gut level.
And then you've got the music itself. It's not just traditional hip hop sounds, right? They throw in these hints of other genres, jazz and AWOL, electric shock, Flintstone flop.
This is where the Beastie Boys get radical. This was a time when hip-hop was still kind of figuring itself out. And here they are, sampling punk bands, throwing in distorted guitar sounds, even jazz elements. It's more than just fusion. It's a statement. Like, hey, hip-hop can be anything it wants to be.
It wasn't just throwing everything in a blender, though, was it? They were really deliberate about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're sampling. It was almost surgical. They'd take this tiny piece of sound, maybe a drum beat or a bass line, and loop it, twist it, layer it, until it became something totally new.
Yeah, and Intergalactic, it's a perfect example of that. It's like they built this whole sonic spaceship out of all these different parts. It's got that incredible energy, but then there are all these little surprises, these unexpected sounds that keep popping up.
Exactly. And they weren't afraid to push the boundaries of what people thought hip-hop should sound like. I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of hip-hop at that time was still very sample-heavy. But the Beastie Boys, they were taking it to another level, blending in live instruments, distorted vocals, all sorts of wild sounds.
It's interesting, though, because even with all that experimentation, they never lost sight of those core elements of hip hop. The beats, the rhymes, the energy. It's like they were expanding the definition of hip hop rather than abandoning it.
That's a great point. They were so deeply rooted in hip-hop culture. But then they also had this punk rock spirit, this DIY ethos. They weren't afraid to break the rules, challenge conventions, maybe even make people a little uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of uncomfortable, can we talk about those lyrics for a minute? Some of those lines are just outrageous, like, my rhymes are flowing like lava from a volcano. I mean, come on.
Right. But that's part of the fun, isn't it? They never took themselves too seriously, always willing to be silly, poke fun at themselves, even be a little ridiculous.
But there's also this intelligence behind the silliness. They were incredibly clever with their wordplay, and they could slip in social commentary, even political satire, in ways that were both funny and made you think.
Absolutely.
Oh.
They weren't just messing around, they had things to say. And they used their platform to talk about issues like racism, sexism, environmental stuff, important stuff.
And they did it in a way that made you want to listen, right? It wasn't preachy, it was engaging. They invited you to think critically, question the status quo.
Exactly. They understood the power of humor, to kind of disarm people, make them more open to different ideas.
For those who might not know their whole story, they actually started out as a punk band back in the early 80s. So it makes sense that they brought that rebellious energy to their hip hop.
Yeah, that punk rock background, it's essential to understanding their sound, their whole attitude, that DIY ethos, that willingness to experiment and challenge the norms. It really set them apart.
And they definitely weren't afraid of controversy. I mean, some of their early stuff, especially the lyrics on their first album, License to Ill, got a lot of people talking, debating about misogyny, violence, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that some of their early lyrics were, well, problematic. They reflected a certain immaturity, a lack of awareness that, to their credit, they later acknowledged and addressed, both in their music and in interviews.
It's interesting to see how they evolved over time. You can hear it in their music, a growing maturity, a social consciousness.
Definitely. They grew as artists, as people, and their music reflected that. It became more introspective, more nuanced, more willing to grapple with complex issues.
But they never lost that sense of fun, that playful energy that made them so infectious. Even when they were dealing with serious topics, they always managed to inject that humor, that absurdity into the music.
That's what makes them so timeless. You
Yeah.
know? Their music, it speaks to that universal human desire to let loose, have a good time, challenge the rules, be yourself. Breaking free from those everyday constraints, those expectations that society puts on us, and tapping into something bigger, something more expansive.
So it's about pushing ourselves, getting out of our comfort zones, exploring new ideas, new ways of being.
Absolutely. Think about how they approached music. They mixed genres, sampled from unexpected sources, created something new and unique. That's what Another Dimension is all about. Embracing the unknown, taking risks, pushing the boundaries.
It's like they're saying, don't just consume culture, create it.
Exactly. And that's such an important message, especially today. We live in a world saturated with information, entertainment, and it's easy to just passively consume. But the Beastie Boys, they were all about creation, using your imagination to shape the world around you.
And they did it with such joy, such humor. It wasn't about being pretentious or anything. It was about having fun, being playful, not taking yourself too seriously.
That's a big part of it, right? It's not about being super serious or academic. It's about finding that joy in creation, in exploration, in pushing yourself beyond what you think you know.
Intergalactic, it's not just a song. It's like a manifesto for creative living.
It's a reminder that we all have the potential to tap into that another dimension,
Yeah.
to break free from the ordinary and create something extraordinary.
So what does all of this mean for us, the listeners, in our everyday lives? How do we bring some of that intergalactic spirit into our world?
Well, I think it starts with curiosity. Be open to new experiences, new ideas, new ways of doing things. Don't be afraid to step outside your comfort zone and experiment a little.
And don't be afraid to fail, right? The Beastie Boys, they weren't afraid to try things that hadn't been done before, and they didn't always get it right the first time.
Right. It's about the process, that journey of discovery. And most importantly, have fun along the way. Don't take yourself too seriously. Creativity should be joyful, liberating, empowering.
This has been incredible. We've gone from wordplay to genre-bending music to a whole philosophy of creative living. It's amazing how much depth there is to a song that on the surface seems so simple, so fun.
That's the power of great art, right?
Mhm.
It works on so many levels. It engages us emotionally, intellectually, maybe even spiritually.
So to our listeners out there, keep exploring those other dimensions, keep pushing boundaries, keep creating, and most importantly, keep having fun. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.